Vulnerability may be one of the scariest ideas in relationship building. And did you know that in trying to avoid vulnerability, we often communicate in a way that undermines our efforts to build relationship and build connection with other people? Why is that, and how can practicing appropriate vulnerability help you build more life-giving relationships starting today? Hi everybody, this is Greg from Heart Tools, where we make it simple to build great relationships. And in her book titled Getting Real, Dr. Susan Campbell talks about a survey that she did where she discovered that 80% of communication was the speaker's attempt to control things that are completely outside of their control. And this is what we do quite often with our communication. For example, I may be talking to you, and what I'm really trying to do is I'm trying to control the way that you think about me. I want someone to think of me as smart or good or just or powerful, right? I want to create a certain perception of myself in the other person's mind, and I am using my words to try to make them think of me in a certain way, when in reality, we have no control over the way other people think about us. Or sometimes when we communicate, we're trying to control other people. We're trying to control what they think. We're trying to control the choices that they make. We often use our words to try to control things that are completely outside of our control. Now, thinking about using 80% of our communication to control things that are completely out of our control is pretty mind-boggling. So you have a choice to make, and the choice is this: are you going to continue communicating to try to control things that are out of your control, or are you going to choose to communicate in a way that focuses in on the things that you can control? And here's one of the most simple things underneath your control is you can choose to communicate with authenticity, not to control what someone thinks about you, not to control the choices they make. Simply choose to communicate with authenticity so that that person has an opportunity to know and connect with the real you if they choose to take advantage of that opportunity. Now, communicating in that way is going to require you to master the skill of appropriate vulnerability. And I say appropriate vulnerability because, as we've said in this series on self-disclosure, is that the appropriate vulnerability, appropriate disclosure is geared around the trust level that you've already built up in the relationship. So you don't want to jump in the deep end of the pool with your vulnerability, but you do want to practice at each step into the pool, from the shallow end all the way to the deep end, at each step an appropriate level of vulnerability, because the reality is you cannot hide and connect at the same time. And if you want real life-giving connection where people know the real you, we need to practice the skill of appropriate vulnerability. And I want to give you a very simple way to begin practicing the skill of appropriate vulnerability. And it's a very small step, but it will make all the difference in the way you are able to connect with people. And it's this: practice eliminating all of the you statements from your speech and replace them instead with I statements. For example, let's say you're talking to someone and they say, you know how when you go to a party and you don't know anybody there and you stand around for a long time and you start feeling stupid, and the more you stand there, the worse you feel, until like you just can't wait to get out of that party and you just feel ridiculous, right? Now, let's imagine that person replacing those you statements with I statements, and instead they say something: you know what, when I go to a party and I don't know anybody there and I end up standing around for a long time all by myself, and I just start feeling stupid. And the longer I'm there and I'm not talking to anybody, the more ridiculous I feel. And I get to the point where all I want to do is leave. Right now, it's a simple change, changing from you statements to I statements, but did you notice how much more connecting the I statements are? And that's because when we use you statements, it's an attempt to talk about ourselves without being vulnerable, because I'm really not talking about me. I'm talking about this big group of people over here, and you're supposed to infer that I belong to it, but I'm communicating about myself in a way that takes all the vulnerability out. But when I use the I statements, it's very clear that I am talking about myself, and the sense of direct connection that you feel with someone who uses I statements is dramatically different. Or here's another example. Suppose someone says to you, you know how when you're mentoring your employees and you put a lot of work into it and you're doing a long time, you just wonder if it's making any difference. And then one of them says something about, that you've made a huge impact on their career. It just kind of makes you feel good. You know how that's true, right? That's how we use you statements. But suppose that person said instead, I've been mentoring a few of my employees for quite a long time, and sometimes I don't know if it's making a difference, but just this week, one of my employees told me that I had been making a huge impact on their career, and they told me how much they valued it. And I'll tell you what, it just made a huge difference. It really made me feel good. Again, you notice how much more connecting I statements are to you statements. So, as a simple first step in choosing to practice communication that's appropriately vulnerable, practice eliminating all the you statements from your conversations and instead replace them with I statements, where instead of talking about a category you belong to, you're talking about yourself, and see what a difference that makes in the connection that you feel with the people that you care about. Simple steps, practice, practice, practice. That's what Heart Tools is all about.